Why, no, I don't know why there's a strobing effect in the background. Thank you for asking, though. Hello, everyone. My name is Jamie. Thank you for coming back to my channel. Today, we are doing another Dollar Tree book review. Today, we are going over Gingerbread by Helen Oyeyemi. So, I actually got the large print version, meaning the font is bigger for those who can't see as well. On Storygraph, this was listed as 200 some odd pages, something like that. So I started reading this because in September I wanted to read my shorter books, anything that was 300 pages or less. So I started reading that, and I didn't realize that it was actually this specific edition is 372 pages because of the large print. And I thought, it's going to go by really fast because, it's a lot more pages, but the words are bigger. No, this really did feel like an almost 400 page book. So this is my disclaimer. I'm going to be breaking down the entire plot of the book. I'm going to be going through everything that happens. If you are against spoilers, feel free to leave the video now. I want to talk about the plot because by all means, I should have liked this book. There are so many things about the book where individually I like them. I like the specific moments in the book. I like some of the ideas that were going on. I like a lot of the elements. Just something about the book didn't work for me, and I don't know what, so I'm gonna have to break down the plot and kind of explain things in order to review it. Essentially, this book is about Harriet Lee and her family, her mother Margot and her daughter Perdita, and how the Lee family is connected to the Kercheval family. But there's a few other things going on. First of all, this book is magical realism, which I love. If you're not familiar with it, magical realism, it's different from urban fantasy. Urban fantasy is a modern setting with fantastical, usually D&D things going on. But magical realism is supposed to be our world, or a reflection of our world, that just has something else going on in it. Characters are supposed to be really grounded and really human-like, and then there's just something kind of fishy going on. You see magical realism a lot more in plays, and because I'm a theater girly, I love magical realism, and I think it is the best thing. I don't know if I can think of a book off the top of my head that's magical realism. Let me see. Nothing that I've read recently. It's just got that the je ne sais quoi, something about it is so different because it's our world, but there's just something beyond our world, and it's really cool. You can do a lot with it, and when it's done really well, it's just super interesting. I guess I will start at the beginning. We are introduced to Harriet. We talk a lot about gingerbread. Gingerbread is supposed to be a motif. I'm not sure I'm smart enough to know what that motif is, what it pertains to, what it's supposed to be. I think friendship, because at the very end, the whole idea is that Harriet Lee can't make friends because of her life and the people in her life. I guess that's the entire theme of the book, is that friendship is hard. And it is. I have 4, 5, 6 friends. 6 friends. We're introduced to Harriet. She's in her early to mid 30s. She has a well-paying job. She's got a benefactor who she works with, doing little odd jobs for him. Seems like her odd jobs are researching family trees and genealogy reports for certain people. It's not really touched on. It's seen at the beginning, and then we don't really talk about it later on. It's not that important. She lives in a weird flat with her daughter, who's 17. Her name's Perdita, and Harriet cannot make friends. This difficulty for Harriet to make friends is seen in a couple different scenes. One of them, she's calling somebody because she missed their lunch date. And she's like, hey, person A, where are you? You missed our lunch, because we always have lunch at this time on this day, and we talk about, what projects we're working on. And the other person responds with like, I don't know you. Apparently person A, I forget the name. There is a name, but I forget it. Didn't even know Harriet's name. She was just somebody she passed the lunch hour with on like Wednesdays or whatever. And she never thought that those lunch dates were very important. She's like, yeah, I didn't know you. I didn't even know you had my number. Like, I completely moved cities. I'm in a different city. And Harriet's like, oh, okay, sorry to bother you. And I like that scene because it does a really good job of showing how Harriet assumes everyone is her friend. She's got this naivety and like generous friendship where she just, as if you like are, if you're nice to her, she's like, you're my friend now. And other people don't see that. They see her as more of an acquaintance or something. The other like example of her difficulty making friends is with the PTA. They're not called the PTA, they have a different name, but it's basically the PTA. And she gives them this gingerbread. The gingerbread is a family recipe as a way to like try and break the ice, get to know everyone in the PTA like group. And they hate it. They're like, this, I don't want gingerbread. Like, I'm not gonna eat this, whatever. At one point, she's giving the gingerbread to like one of the nicer people, and it like falls on the ground, and then somebody else like steps all over it. And so there's this image of Harriet, the entire meeting just quietly sweeping up gingerbread crumbs, which is so sad. Anyway, she is looking through like the different pictures up on the school wall, and she sees the PTA group, but as students they had all gone to the school and were like best friends, and they all had children around the same time, and so then they formed the PTA group. And Harriet realizes that she's like a decade too late to make it into this friend group. You're probably wondering where the magical realism comes in. Harriet and her family are Druhastranian. Harriet and Margot came from a country called Druhastana. This is a country that the entire world does not believe exists. There are a few people who like claim to be Druhastranian, but it's not on any maps. There's only 3 countries in the world that recognized it as its own sovereign country. 2 of them like renounced that acknowledgement and called it a hoax. So now there's only 1 country that acknowledges Druhastrana as its own sovereign nation. And it's really funny, and I like that. I really like that concept of being like from a country that doesn't exist. Like it's on Earth. It's not a fantasy. It's not Narnia, but it's a country that like may or may not exist. That's such a cool idea. I love that. And it actually gave me an idea. If I ever have children, I'm just going to pretend that I'm from a different country that doesn't exist. And I'm just going to gaslight them for like 12 years of their life. And just be like, yeah, you're half Lithuanian. I almost said Lithuania. That's a real country. So Margot and Harriet are both from Druhastrana. They immigrated to the UK, but Perdita was born in London, I think. Perdita wants to learn more about Druhastrana, but Harriet and Margot don't really like talking about it. They left for a reason, things like that. Harriet had this best friend named Gretel, and Gretel and her made a pact to find each other again once they grew up, but they didn't really say exactly when, just meet me at one of these locations. And then, Perdita poisons herself. Perdita makes a gingerbread cookie and eats it, and it had some sort of powder or thingy in it that almost killed her. And in her like note that she left for Harriet, she says like, I'm not trying to kill myself, I want to go see Druhastrana, don't wake me, or something like that. But obviously Harriet freaks out and she like rushes to get help. There's actually this beautiful scene that I found very beautiful. I don't know, it's very small. Perdita and Harriet both live on the like 7th floor of a walk-up with like very steep stairs, and so trying to carry like a gurney up there would have been almost impossible. In like almost a one-off, like at the very end of the chapter, Harriet, or the narrator, mentions that because Harriet was so panicked, the neighbors came out and they carried Perdita down the 7 flights of stairs, or they like passed her, and I thought that was gorgeous. Like, that's a very beautiful like community helping each other. Perdita makes it through. There's this long scene where she's at the hospital and Harriet's trying to get more information on like where Perdita was, what she might have gotten into, did anyone like bully her. She's talking to the PTA. One of the PTA members is like sending them gifts and stuff, and Harriet's like, oh my god, is she a friend? And then she's like, no. I thought somebody else was a friend. I can't just assume she's a friend because she's being nice. Perdita makes it home. She's got this like thing where she's been unconscious for like 7 days. So her brain's kind of recuperating and things like that. And so the doctor tells Harriet that she just needs to talk to Perdita. She just, it doesn't matter what, just talk to her. So Perdita takes this time to ask Harriet to tell her about Drew Hastrana and how she moved from Drew Hastrana to the UK. Once she gets that story, she will tell Harriet how she got to Drew Hastrana. Oh, I forgot to say, when Harriet woke up, she had a ring that was like a matching one to Harriet's, and so the only other person who had that ring was Gretel, Harriet's best friend from Drew Hastrana. Drew Hastrana is a very small country with weird things going on. Very vaguely, she talks about this animal-plant hybrid thing. Doesn't have anything to do with the story, just is there. It's mostly farmland, and then there's one big city. So Harriet grew up on the farm, but her mother was the daughter of the richest man in Drew Hastrana. He disowned her, though, once she married like a commoner, and so she doesn't have access to that money. The farm is not owned by the Lee family at all. The farm is owned by somebody else that the Lee family works for, basically. There's a lot of world building with like just what is going on in Drew Hastrana and like the farm life and whatnot. Not very important. Margot arranges a meeting with the person who owns the farm, who is Cleo Kercheval. Cleo has a daughter named Gretel. Harriet runs into Gretel at a well. There is just this well, also named Gretel's Well, no correlation. And so then Harriet runs into this girl who pops her head out of the well, and she's got 2 irises, pupils. She has 2 pupils. Each eye has 2 pupils. But Harriet finds her again back at the well later that night, and she's getting to know Gretel, and Gretel's like, I killed a girl. Harriet's like, what are you talking about? She's like, yeah, I killed a girl. She like attacked me, so I threw her down the well. She's probably dead. And Harriet's like, we need to go down there. We need to go like save her. And she's like, no, she's dead. We're gonna run away. You're an accomplice now, so you're gonna run away with me. And Harriet's like, no. So she goes down and she saves it. It was a girl named Dottie. Dottie is fine. They all safely return to Harriet's farm. Cleo is eating this like gingerbread that was made, it's a family recipe, so she shares it with everyone, right? She's eating this and she's like, this is amazing, we need to sell this. And so then she gets all of the farmstead girls and she brings them to the big city with her. That she creates this company called the Gingerbread Girls, where all these farm girls make gingerbread. But it's also kind of weird because it's almost implied that it's some sort of maybe not sex work, but it's like the girls aren't just making gingerbread. They also like dress up. They have to be dressed up in like the gingerbread girl uniform. They play with the adults. The adults are just trying to pretend that they're younger, but they have to have like tea parties and dances and other things. They have to entertain these adults and pretend that they're young. That goes on for a while. Harriet soon realizes that the letters she's receiving from her family are fake. They're not real letters, and she connects the dots that her letters probably aren't reaching her family either. So she stops writing altogether. We get a big section of her at the gingerbread house. It's really weird. It's kind of just here, and here. Not a lot that I can remember. And I only read this book like last week. She like wants to go to school, so she gets Gretel's old like hand-me-down books. After they've been there for a few years, there's like a field trip for the other farmstead girls. The farm girls pin the gingerbread girls down and like violently pinch them. It goes on for like a really long time. They like violently pinching them. I don't know why. They have like bruises from these pinchings, but they don't ever say why they were pinching the other girls. I don't know anything about that. They just like were pinned down and violently attacked. So Cleo says that Harriet can play with Gretel, and they go to meet like a professor because Harriet's really into reading, and so she like wants to meet this professor, and she's like, okay, your drink is on me, right? And so she goes to pay with the money that she saved up from the gingerbread house, and the guy kind of laughs at her and is like, okay, now give me your real money. And she goes back to the table and she's like, this is money, right? And they're like, no, honey, that is fake money. That is not our currency. She has Gretel confront Gretel's own mother about not paying the gingerbread girls, which means she probably wasn't paying them at all, because the whole point was like they were getting money and then they were sending it to their families. So she probably was not paying their families for the child labor. Cleo is meant to be like a villainous person, like she's not supposed to be good. After she realizes that the money is fake, she kind of just quits. She calls up her mom, and her mom's like, we're getting out of here. We're leaving Druhastrana. I don't know, it's so confusing how they made this plan. They have to leave as cargo because they can't get passports. So they take this drug, this like powdered drug, and they get all wiggly. They get like their bones melt or something. I don't know if it's like literal or metaphorical, but they are shipped as cargo and they are received by the Kercheval family, but not Cleo and Gretel Kercheval, like a different kind of Kercheval, but like they're the same family, but they're not Druhastranian because they don't know anything about Druhastrana. But they receive Harriet and Margot and they house them for a few years. So we are done with the Druhastrana side. We are now in the UK. We are in, I think they said, Whitby. Harriet grows up with these two boys, Gabriel and Remy, who are cousins. They are Kercheval cousins. Their fathers are very rich. They have a family business about like financing. There's a lot going on. This section is narrated as Harriet going down her list. It was a list of how readable they were. So she's like, obviously I knew my mom. I could read her personality, her expressions all the time. And then she would go down and she'd be like, the third most readable was Ambrose, the uncle, and he was super easy to understand. And the fifth most readable was Gabriel because he was studious but sometimes mean to me, or something like that. Little vignettes of like different parts of her life being like, lived here with these guys and this happened. I lived here with this and this happened. My mom and I moved out, struck it out on our own. And then she talks about her relationship with Gabriel. I actually really like the relationship with Gabriel. I think the way it's described is really fun. So Gabriel went off to uni. They've kind of stopped talking to the family, Lee and the Kercheval family. Gabriel has this like crush on her. He's always kind of liked her, but he's been with somebody else recently, and she drunkenly leaves like 38 voice messages, and so he comes back to her, and then they like start a relationship, but it's just sex. But like, it's not smut sex, it's not spicy scenes, it's not very vivid descriptions of sex, but it is like lovingly vibrant descriptions of sex. So it's like, you know, they're hormonal teenagers, they're gonna be fucking, but it's written nicer than that. It's written, I really like, it's right up my alley because I don't like spice scenes. So it's great because it's not like vivid depictions of the sexual acts, but it's like, this is how the sexual acts made them feel. Thank you. I like that description. Anyway, it's really nicely done. I like the relationship with Gabriel. I like kind of what it represented in their life, specifically about their status as people. Like, Gabriel is the heir to a financial billion-dollar company, and she is a random immigrant from a make-believe country. Her relationship threatens Gabriel's mother, Tamar, because she obviously doesn't want the heir to the billion-dollar company to have like a weird wife or whatever. I don't know. But yeah, Tamar does not approve of the relationship. And so then Harriet obviously falls pregnant. We know this because she has a daughter. She falls pregnant and Gabriel's like, I can't have a kid. And she's like, I know. And he's like, so you're going to get rid of this kid? And she's like, I guess if I have to. Does not go to the clinic appointments. And Gabriel gets like fucking pissed. He starts like threatening her. He gets really scary. He's like, I can't have a kid. You need to know this. Like, it will ruin me. Harriet calls up Remy, the older cousin. It just immediately knows how to fix the situation. And I love this. I think this element was done so well. So Remy says that the best way to handle this is to take it out of Gabriel's hands, like take him out of control. So he and Harriet announce the child as theirs. He's like, Mom, Dad, we've always been in love. Here's our child, which is a little bit weird because she's like just freshly 18, maybe even 17, and he's like 26 or something. But whatever, we'll let it slide because we know it's not really his, right? Remy's always been like the kind of fuck the family types. He really doesn't care about being the heir. And Gabriel is immediately like, I know it's not. I know it's not your child. And Remy's like, shut the fuck up, Gabriel. Get the fuck out of here. It's really cute to me of like this friend or a relative taking responsibility of like a pregnancy announcement or, you know, a pregnancy in order to kind of protect the other person to make sure that the crazy guy doesn't get her. I like that idea. I think it was done really well. It's interesting and I think it's fun. I even like the way they handled the end of that because Remy at the end, he's like, oh, okay, I've scheduled you an appointment with an abortion clinic. And she's like, what do you mean? He's like, you can't have a kid. You're too young. And she's like, okay, but that's my decision. And he's like, all right, well, I'm going to tell the family that you miscarried and we broke up, all right? So even Remy, who was like, I can handle this situation. I'll take it out of Gabriel's, hands. Fuck this family. Doesn't want to take actual responsibility for the kid. And he like tries to coerce her into the decision that he thinks is best, which is, not the decision she wanted. Anyway, she ends up having Perdita. We kind of skip forward now that she's explained how she grew up in Drew Hastrana and what she did to come over. Now it is Perdita's time to explain how and why she did what she did. So at this point, I was kind of skipping through because it was getting super long. It was starting to drag like a lot. So what Perdita says is basically she got in contact with the Kercheval, I don't remember their names anymore, Ambrose, the uncle, and Tamar, her grandmother, but she didn't know it was her grandmother, asked them how to get to Drew Hastrana, and they gave her a weird powder, and then she eats that, and she goes there? I don't know. It's very vague. I don't remember anything about that, but she somehow comes back with the ring that Gretel had. That is the matching one to Harriet's. Harriet obviously goes to confront the Kerchevals and is like, what did you fucking do to my daughter? And she like fights them and she gives them some nasty words and she meets up with Gabriel again and she's like, fuck you, Gabriel. And he's like, I deserve that. They start talking about this idea that they had where I don't really know how to explain this idea. I really did not understand it. And at that point, I was too tired to try and understand or like parse it out. They needed to go to different haunted houses that were going to be locations for other immigrants that they were going to sponsor, basically. And each of these houses were in the locations that Gretel and Harriet chose to meet up later in life. And while they were spending the night in the first haunted house, there's a scene where Gretel comes and she's like trying to get Harriet's attention and Harriet is too sleepy and misses the meeting. And then they like get the blessing of the haunted house, which wasn't really haunted. It was just a person who still lived there. The same with the second house. Gretel tries to meet up with her and she is too busy, can't meet up with Gretel, and they get some sort of blessing from the family or people that still live there to have the haunted house. There's like a break in between the second and the third house where Harriet goes back to her regular life. Perdita's like fine, she's back at school, and Harriet meets up with the PTO group and they're like gossiping with her. They're like, hey, this and this person is doing this and this person's trying to like usurp this person or whatever. And Harriet's like, oh my God, are we friends? And it's the same woman that was giving her gifts and trying to help her out when Perdita was in the hospital. And the woman was like, yeah. And there was a really nice line where it was like Harriet was waiting for a third sign that this person wanted to be friends with her, and it never occurred to her that she could give that third sign. And I like that. This like third house comes available and they're supposed to like go there, and Harriet is pondering. She's like, these are all the locations that I've tried to like meet up with Gretel before, like we planned to do that. And then she turns to Perdita and she's like, you know what? You remind me a lot of Gretel. There's some things that you do and things that Gretel do. Are you Gretel? Oh, that's the other thing. Gretel is supposed to be a changeling. She didn't feel like she had to explain it, but Gretel's supposed to be a changeling, and she's not supposed to like grow up actually. So she's supposed to like meet Harriet in some other form, I guess. I'm not sure. But Harriet's like, hey, Perdita, are you Gretel? And Perdita's like, no. And then Harriet's like, I think Gretel is the reason why I can't make friends. And then she's like, you know what? I'll go to that third location and maybe I'll see Gretel and maybe we'll finally have closure to this. Fades to black basically, and you realize that Gretel has been the one narrating this whole story. She starts talking to Harriet specifically and is like, when I see you again, this and that. And that's the end. I tried to go to the other reviews on Storygraph after I'd finished to see what other people were saying about this, because like I said, there are enough elements in this book that I really liked the idea of. I liked how some scenes played out. I liked the imagery. I liked those moments. I thought there were a lot of emotional moments, a lot of fun things going on. And I think that there really could be something within this story, but it just didn't hit for me. The general consensus on Storygraph is the same thing, is that for whatever reason, the story just didn't hit for a lot of people. They didn't understand it, that they had liked her other books, but this one was just a little bit off, that there wasn't enough. Somebody said that it was too abstracted, which I think is a really good word. It was so abstracted from reality that it didn't really flow or make sense. It did feel like this part, this part, this part, and it felt like Harriet was just being dragged from life point to life point. She didn't have any agency in her own life. Yeah, I don't really know why I didn't like this book. I think, you know, it being abstracted, it being a little too out there. And I like weird and kind of vague imaginary books. I don't know how else to describe it, but you know, not of this world and magical realism. I really like that. And you know, I have a background in plays, and plays are black box, you know, they can be absolutely nothing. They can be very abstract and weird, and yet I still struggled with reading this book, so I'm not exactly sure I would recommend it. I think I gave this book like a 3 star, something like that, 3 stars, just because, I mean, it was fun. There were some parts that I enjoyed. Yeah, it was really hard to think of anything to say about the book. I mean, there's a reason this whole video is just me going over the plot, because I had no ideas about the actual book. I had a hard time remembering this book, and I finished it like last week. And it's not like I've read a lot of books since then. I finished it and then I read The Great Gatsby. Like, that's the only other book I've read recently. Anyway, that's gonna be it for me, I think. If you've read Gingerbread by Helen Oyeyemi, please put your thoughts down in the comments below. And if you were from a make-believe country, what would the country be called, and what would its signature dish be? All right, I guess I'll see you later. Bye! I don't know if you can tell, but I have this like rainbow blush going on. It's actually a lot more subtle than I thought. I mean, it's not subtle, but I feel like I could wear this to work. Probably not, though. I probably shouldn't.